Hey guys, it's Ted Possible, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It took me years to realize this concept, but let me ask you a question. If you have a player who bets with nothing all the time, all three streets, so pre-flop, on the flop, turn, and the river, and he goes up against a player who calls only when he has a hand, a pair or better, which one is the worst player? Are they both bad players? What is a bad player? Let's talk about that. This discussion comes up all the time on my mastermind about bad players. This guy made this move. He wasn't skilled. He's a bad player. So I'm going to tell you my philosophy, and it's a bit shocking. I don't look at players as bad or good. In fact, I don't believe there are bad players. Are there unskilled players? Sure, but it never comes into my thinking when I play poker, and here's why. Let's take the most extreme example. Let's take a player who bets with air or nothing all of the time versus a player who calls with bottom pair or better all of the time. Who is the worst player here? Well, you could say that it is the player who calls with bottom pair because the player who bets with air all the time can have top pair or has the other player beat. But then we can go one level deeper and say, well, isn't the player who's betting all the time when the guy is calling with bottom pair worse because he doesn't identify that the other player calls with bottom pair or better all the time? It's arguably so. And in fact, you could go back and forth and never really prove who the worst player is. So here's the lesson in all of this that I learned. It took me over a decade to learn it, but I did learn it. When you look at players as bad or good, the first thing that happens is you get emotionally invested in them. The second thing that happens is you don't have any accountability to your actions. If you think a player is bad, well, then you should easily be able to defeat someone. You understand how they're playing. And if you don't, then it's actually on you that you weren't able to adjust. What do I mean by this? Let's take the example of a player who always calls with an ace. And again, notice I'm not saying a bad or an unskilled or a novice player. I'm saying a player who always calls with an ace. So a player who always calls with an ace pre-flop, on the flop, on the turn, on the river, hoping to hit an ace and then never folds. Let's say you know this about a player at your table, but you still decide to put in a major bluff. A bluff such as you 3-bet them pre-flop, you raise them on the flop, you raise them on the turn, and you jam the river. But they still call you with an ace. Well, that's actually not their fault. They're just being the player that they are. They just love an ace and they can never let it go. It's actually the responsibility is on you to identify the player and then adjust your playing style to meet them. So stop bluffing them when an ace hits the board. And this is true of a lot of player types. So when players say to me, well, this guy's a bad player, it means nothing to me. I'd rather know that they'll call you with any pair, or they'll call you with any ace, or they overvalue flush draws and straight draws, or they will call a check, raise, bet, jam, river. These are all valuable information to know. And in fact, you could label any one of them as good as or bad. I mean, is a good player the player who gets the chips? Is a good player a player who plays good cards? I don't know what the definition is. What I do know is I identify players by the actions they take, the lines they take, as well as the pressure points that they fold to. These are essential in poker. So the next time you're thinking to yourself, man, this guy is a terrible player, why are you thinking that? Don't you want to play players that are less skilled than you? Don't you want to play players that you know how they play? And if you do, then you certainly can't blame them for being themselves. And in fact, you should expect them to be themselves. Human behavior doesn't change without a great catalyst. So if there is no catalyst to change human behavior, you should expect it to continue, especially at the poker table. If you know a guy is going to always bluff, he's going to bluff. Sometimes he'll have a hand, sure, but most of the time he'll be bluffing. If you know a guy is always going to call, you probably shouldn't bluff that individual. You probably should bluff him with the nuts or a hand that you think that he's not beating. So once again, who's the worst of the players? Well, I think my answer comes down to this. If you know how someone plays and you fail to adjust to exploit it, then I am if I do that. I'm the worst player. It doesn't matter what their experience is. If I'm sitting at a table full of people who've never played poker before, I'm certainly going to play poker in such a way that I can exploit them. So the next time you're thinking, man, that guy's really bad, he bad beat me, or, I can't believe it, you can't bluff poor players, turn the fingers from them onto you and analyze your play. And I'm absolutely sure it will make you a better player overall. So that's a little tip and a trick that you can do. The trick is this. When you start to think someone's a bad player, start to analyze your own behavior and think, what can I do differently in this situation next time? How can I use this situation to my advantage? So again, the next time you're like, man, this guy's a terrible player, I hate that he got there. Think about how you could have changed the hand to exploit the situation. So an example of this might be, well, if you're playing against the player who's going to always call, then variance is much higher and you're not going to be able to bluff as often. But if you're playing against the player who's always going to fold unless he has top pair, then you can bluff more. So it's these types of things that you take objectively instead of subjectively, the actions of the player that make the player highly exploitable and make your game more profitable. But first, you have to submit your EO at the door because, as I said, there's no such thing as a bad player. Thanks, guys. This has been Ted Possible. A little programming update for you. So I'm working on making the vlog better, and in doing so, I made a promise to everyone that I would record the events of the days up until I became a full-time professional poker player, and I will. But the release schedule for the vlog is a bit congested. So what I have decided to do is take the recordings that I do every single day and compile them together and release a weekly vlog until it's necessary to do more content than a week. So I hope you guys understand. The weekly vlog will be compiled. It'll have a message. It'll go over what I did for the week, as well as a tip and a trick or something you could do at the table to help you get your profits up. Well, guys, again, this is Ted Possible, reminding you anything is possible, including realizing that the actions of a player are more important whether they are good or bad, simply for the fact that it takes you out of an emotional state and puts you into a logical thinking state. Thank you, guys. If you have any comments about this, if you want to, dispute what I'm saying, or you want to talk more about bad player versus good player, or how I, make that decision, comment below, like, subscribe, and I will see you on the felt. This is Ted Possible, and anything is possible.